In the spring of 1453, the heart of the ancient world stopped beating. The walls of Constantinople, walls that had withstood centuries of sieges, crusades, and earthquakes, finally shattered. But the true horror didn't begin on the ramparts. It began in the convents. When the Ottomans broke through the city's defenses, their soldiers didn't just loot and burn. They carried orders, specific, deliberate, and chillingly organized, about what to do with the women who had dedicated their lives to God. Over the next 72 hours, what happened inside those convent walls made death look merciful. This isn't the history you learned in school, because the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople wasn't just about capturing land. It was about rewriting faith itself, and the nuns of the Byzantine Empire became unwilling subjects in a new kind of experiment, the systematic erasure of belief, identity, and even bloodline. 3 methods, each more calculated than the last, and one so grotesque that even modern historians still argue whether it should be spoken aloud. How do we know? Because one woman survived. A single nun, Sister Magdalena, escaped the city with a secret manuscript so explosive that the Vatican locked it away for nearly 4 centuries. When scholars finally uncovered it in 1821, half demanded it be burned. The other half said the world deserved to know. What they found inside redefined the word horror. But before we reach her story, you need to understand why the nuns were targeted in the first place. Why not kill them outright, as conquerors had always done before? Why were these women so valuable, so dangerous, that an empire chose to reprogram them instead of erasing them? Let's go back to that moment. Imagine you're 22 years old, a nun in Constantinople. You've never known the outside world. Your days are spent copying manuscripts in candlelight, tending to the sick, preserving what little remains of Greek and Latin learning. Your convent isn't just a place of worship, it's a fortress of knowledge, filled with rare books, gold icons, and noble-born women fleeing the chaos outside the walls. For 53 days you've heard the cannon fire. The ground shakes with every bombardment. You can smell smoke drifting over the city. You've prayed for a miracle, but deep down every nun knows what's coming. Then, before dawn on May 29th, it happens. The walls crack open, the gates fall. The city that had once been called the heart of Christendom becomes the prize of Sultan Mehmed II, the man history will call the conqueror. He wastes no time. A decree goes out, one recorded in his own victory proclamation, his fat name. For 3 days, every soldier may claim whatever and whomever he desires. Gold, property, manuscripts, and people. The city becomes a marketplace of despair. But what happened next wasn't chaos. It was organization. Eyewitnesses described soldiers moving with lists that named the richest convents, the most educated sisters, the youngest novices. This wasn't looting, it was collection. Now picture yourself hiding in a cellar beneath your convent chapel. Above you, boots crash against the stone floor. Your abbess screams, doors splinter. Someone recites a prayer, and then silence. When the soldiers find you, they don't strike you down. Instead, they offer you 3 choices, each one designed to break not just your body, but your soul. The first, death, quick, almost merciful. Historians estimate that 1 in 5 nuns chose this. They preferred martyrdom to what came next. The second, marriage, forced, immediate, irreversible. You are converted to Islam on the spot, given to a soldier, and told your new life begins now. You go from bride of Christ to bride of your conqueror in less than an hour. Over 1,000 women were married in those 3 days alone. And here's the twisted irony. Many of those soldiers were once Christian boys themselves, stolen through the Devshirme system. They were taken as children, raised as elite Ottoman warriors, janissaries, and trained to see their own form of faith as the enemy. So when a nun was forced to marry one of them, she wasn't just being conquered. She was being handed to someone who represented her own stolen brothers. It was psychological warfare on a level that Europe had never seen. And then came the third option, the one that sounded dignified but was anything but. Imperial service. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? Service to the Sultan's household. But what it truly meant was something far darker, because the Sultan had already planned for this, weeks before the final battle. Among the captured women, the ones who were young, educated and fluent in multiple languages, weren't simply victims. They were assets. He wanted them alive, to serve a very specific purpose, and that purpose would soon turn holy vows into instruments of control. Imagine waking up in a palace instead of a convent. The air smells of rose oil instead of incense. Your head is bare for the first time in your life, your hair cut, styled, perfumed. Your crucifix is gone. In its place, a new name, a new language, and a new command. Forget who you were. Welcome to the Sultan's harem, the glittering cage where identity dies. But these women weren't concubines. Not exactly. They were teachers, translators, cultural intermediaries, carefully selected for their intellect and influence. According to Ottoman archives uncovered centuries later, many were specifically chosen to train newly captured Christian women how to dress, how to speak, how to survive, and eventually, how to submit. The empire didn't just want to convert these women, it wanted to use them, to turn faith into a tool of assimilation. Venetian diplomatic letters from 1454 describe stories filtering back to Europe. Nuns teaching young Polish captives to recite prayers in Arabic. Greek sisters instructing Hungarian noblewomen how to bow before Ottoman officials. Serbian novices being taught to forget the sign of the cross. Conversion wasn't a ceremony. It was a process, slow, systematic, and psychological. First came isolation. Each nun was separated from the others, placed among Turkish-speaking attendants who punished her for speaking her own tongue. Then came re-education, forced memorization of Quranic verses, often under threat of starvation. And finally, the breaking point, confrontation. Converted nuns, your former sisters, brought before you to testify that Islam was the truth and Christianity a lie. You watch their faces, their trembling voices, their hollow eyes as they repeat what they've been made to believe. And then it's your turn. Can you imagine that moment? Can you imagine staring into the eyes of the woman who once prayed beside you, now calling you a heretic for refusing to yield? It was spiritual warfare disguised as mercy, and for those who gave in, there was no going back. Some became mura, governesses, responsible for training the next wave of captives. They were forced to teach what had been forced upon them. How to act, how to obey, how to erase yourself completely. Sister Magdalena's smuggled manuscript, written years later, describes one such woman. She called her sister Anna. Anna had taken her vows of chastity before the siege. Now, she was ordered to teach other captured women how to please the men who owned them. She obeyed because disobedience meant death, but every lesson, every whispered instruction, killed another part of her. Magdalena called it the theft of the soul, not because it stole faith, but because it made you complicit in your own destruction. Imagine that torment, being both the victim and the instrument of someone else's control. What would that do to a human mind? How do you recover from that kind of erasure? Yet, even in that darkness, some resisted. Some women refused to speak Turkish, refused to repeat prayers they didn't believe in. They were beaten, starved, locked in isolation. And when they still wouldn't yield, they were sent away, to a fate even worse than death. Because for those who would not convert, who would not serve, the Sultan had one final method, a method that would echo through history, shatter every remaining illusion of mercy, and scar generations to come. The breeding program. The Vatican would call it the sin beyond martyrdom, and it would change how the Church defined the very meaning of faith under duress. But that's where the story turns darkest. And the woman who lived to tell it, Sister Magdalena, would risk everything to make sure the world never forgot what she saw. For the nuns who refused to surrender, who clung to their faith even as the empire closed its fists around them, the punishment was neither execution nor exile. It was something far more twisted, something the Vatican would later call the sin beyond martyrdom. These women were sent not to prisons, but to barracks. specifically to the Janissary compounds, the training grounds of the empire's elite soldiers, the same soldiers who had once been stolen from Christian villages as children. Now the cycle was about to begin again, in reverse. According to the Greek chronicler Critobulus, who witnessed the siege himself and later served under Sultan Mehmed II, these women were presented with marriage contracts, not concubinage, legal state-sanctioned marriages to the Janissaries. Imagine the logic behind it. You have a generation of men who were once Christian, taken as boys, reshaped into perfect instruments of loyalty. Now you bind them to women who represent the faith they were trained to destroy. Their children, half Ottoman, half Byzantine, would belong entirely to the empire. This was no random cruelty. It was strategy, a breeding program designed to turn faith itself into a genetic weapon. And the most terrifying part, it worked. Documents uncovered in Catholic Church investigations from the 1450s describe testimony from escaped nuns who told identical stories. Marriages arranged by decree, children registered at birth as Muslims, mothers forbidden to speak their native language in front of them, their sons, taken away at the age of 7, enrolled in military academies to become the next generation of Janissaries, their daughters sent to the harem system to repeat the cycle. One nun told papal investigators in 1455, "They make us birth our own conquerors." Another said, "They chain us with our children's love." Because what do you do when the child you prayed would die in infancy? Lives. When his face is your own, but his prayers are not. When he calls you mother, but fights for the men who enslaved you. Sister Magdalena wrote of one such woman in her manuscript. The woman's name was erased by the Vatican's redactors, but her words remain, "I feed him, and every drop of milk is a drop of my faith leaving me." Between 1453 and 1460, Ottoman records list over 300 documented cases of nuns forcibly married to Janissaries, and those are only the ones we can trace. Others vanished completely. Venetian merchants wrote of ships filled with women gifted to Ottoman governors across Anatolia, the Balkans, even North Africa. Once they left Constantinople, they disappeared from history, nameless, voiceless, erased. But some stories, unbelievably, took another turn. Over time, after years of captivity, after bearing children and being absorbed into Ottoman life, a few of these women stopped resisting. Some even rose in rank, becoming respected wives within the empire. A handful became tutors, scholars, even advisors to Ottoman officials. Not from loyalty, but from survival. Can you imagine that transformation? A woman who once prayed in Latin, now teaching her son the Quran. A nun who once vowed chastity, now negotiating palace politics. It's not betrayal. It's human adaptation in the face of annihilation, because survival, in its own way, is a kind of rebellion. And Magdalena understood that better than anyone. 3 years after the fall of Constantinople, one of those forced brides made an impossible choice. She escaped. Disguised as a man, starved and half-mad, she boarded a Venetian merchant ship bound for Italy. Hidden in a grain barrel was a satchel of parchment. 140 pages written in secret, chronicling everything the empire had done to the women of Constantinople. Names, dates, locations, officials, all recorded in her trembling hand. That woman was Sister Magdalena, and her manuscript would become one of the most forbidden documents in Christian history. When Sister Magdalena reached Italy in 1456, she went straight to the only authority she believed could protect the truth, the Vatican. But instead of protection, she found panic. Her manuscript, written in Greek and Latin, described horrors the Church could barely acknowledge. It listed Ottoman officials by name, detailed the rituals of forced conversion, and catalogued the methods of sexual and psychological torture used against the nuns. She described how captives were made to trample on crucifixes, spit on icons, recite Muslim prayers during violation, all while scribes recorded their compliance as proof of apostasy. It wasn't a confession, it was evidence, a record of systematic dehumanization written by someone who refused to look away. The Vatican locked it away immediately. Only a handful of clerics ever read it. To them, it was too dangerous. not just for its contents, but for its implications. If the world read what she had written, it could ignite another crusade. It could fracture diplomatic ties with the Ottomans, who by then were already negotiating trade with Venice and France. And perhaps most unsettling of all, it challenged the Church's own theology. If a nun was forced to renounce her faith, was she damned? Could she still be called a bride of Christ? Sister Magdalena's manuscript forced theologians to invent a new term, forced apostasy, a recognition that some souls break not from choice but from torment. But Magdalena's words didn't die in that vault. Whispers of her testimony spread through clerical circles and into the courts of Europe. They fueled propaganda campaigns, sermons, and clandestine rescue missions. Papal records show that between 1460 and 1480, secret orders were sent into Ottoman lands to locate and retrieve converted nuns. Few succeeded. Most of the agents were captured or killed. But in total, around 80 women were smuggled out, living proof of the horrors Magdalena had described. Her manuscript changed the course of Catholic doctrine, shaped European views of the Ottoman Empire for 2 centuries, and quietly influenced everything from papal diplomacy to anti-Turkish propaganda during the Renaissance. Even those who never knew her name were haunted by her story. And yet, Magdalena herself never saw her work published. She died in 1462, just 6 years after her escape, still writing, still documenting, still trying to make sense of what she had survived. Venetian archives mention 3 more volumes she completed before her death. None have ever been found. When the Vatican finally reopened its secret archives in the early 19th century, scholars stumbled upon the manuscript by accident. Its pages were fragile, its ink fading, but its power was unmistakable. Within weeks, historians were divided. Some called for its destruction, others for its release. Ultimately, it was sealed again, considered too cruel for public instruction. But the world had changed. By the 20th century, fragments of Ottoman records began to surface. Fragments that matched her testimony, lists of converted women, notes on marriages, births, and adoptions. Not the entire registry Sister Magdalena described, the Sultan's personal ledger of erased identities, but enough to prove she hadn't been lying. And here's where history turns eerily poetic. The very system designed to erase these women ended up shaping the empire itself. Many of the Ottoman Empire's most powerful women, like Hurrem Sultan and Kosem Sultan, were descended from captured Slavic or Balkan Christians. In a way, the daughters of the conquered became the mothers of the empire. The bloodlines the Ottomans tried to weaponize ended up redefining their legacy. Magdalena's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Empires don't just conquer nations, they conquer memories. They write, edit, and erase until only one version of the past survives. But somewhere, hidden in Istanbul or Ankara, maybe in a forgotten library or private collection, there could still be a ledger, a book with thousands of women's names. Names crossed out, renamed, rewritten, waiting to be remembered. And that leads to a haunting question, one that divides historians even now. Should Sister Magdalena's full manuscript ever be released to the public? Every unedited page, every brutal detail, every moment of despair, would it enlighten us or destroy something sacred in the process? Some say yes. The truth, no matter how horrifying, belongs to everyone. Others say no, that some wounds are so deep they should never be reopened. Maybe they're both right. Because the deeper you dig into history's darkness, the more you realize